getting killed!
All die! The House of the Dead.
Now, I don't usually talk much about arcade games on this channel, but this is special. House of the Dead is a series renowned for being one of the original classics of the 90s arcade shooter scene. It also had many spin-offs, references in popular media, and an abysmal movie. House of the Dead has been a long-running series with a long and convoluted story to boot. So to keep it brief and to not create a 40-minute long video, although I could make one down the line if this video gets enough positive attention, let's get into the story of House of the Dead. The DBR Corporation was an organization based in genetic research. The main man behind this corporation was Dr. Chariot. As time began to pass, Chariot took what he had began to work on the corporation and funneled it into genetic research to help save his son Daniel, who was dying of a genetic illness. In the end, Chariot managed to create a gene sequence that could essentially, unquote, bridge the gap between life and death. During this time, and since the 1880s, the corporation had been funded by the Goldman family. Chariot had been working on a project underneath his mansion, and the job of this project was to stop death. After discovering this, Caleb Goldman, who was the head of the Goldman family at the time, decided to increase further funding towards the new bioreactor that Chariot had been working on, and using this money to hasten the efforts towards the proceeds. The reason for this was due to Caleb's deep hatred for humanity. Eventually, due to how drastic the experiments were beginning to become and the extreme circumstances of the genetic reactor, Chariot's staff began to leave him. As the workload began to pile up and it became too much for Chariot, he began to go mad. And eventually, in 1998, he began kidnapping some of his former employees to help with his experiments, as well as experiment on them, causing, well, the Chariot incident to happen. This was the beginning of the foundation and the beginning of the story of the House of the Dead. Now, personally, I feel the most important and best part of these games is their batshit crazy and strange bosses. These bosses, while also being based off tarot cards, are some of the biggest characters within these games, like physically as well. Some would say they are the only characters in comparison as to how deadpan the main cast are.
Amy! Harry!
Thank God you're alright.
What the hell's going on in this city?
Don't know, but it's very similar to the 1990 Experience case.
Anyway, pointless jokes aside about bad voice dubbing, I wanted to make this video and take the opportunity, now that I've finally gotten around to finishing House of the Dead Scarlet Dawn, to talk to you about all of these bosses and which ones I would consider the best of the bunch. Now, when it comes to the criteria of today's video, I will be looking at the boss's design, the characterization of the boss, how interesting their fight is, and last but more importantly, if I feel the boss is very representative of the game they're in. So prepare yourself as we return to the Chariot Mansion, Venice, Italy, the EFI Research Facility, London, and the Scarecrow Manor, as I count down the top 10 House of the Dead bosses. Starting off strong, we have Strength. Strength is basically the series' closest thing to an actually terrifying fight, due to the copious amounts of pressure Strength puts you under as you run away through the Colosseum, which is kind of a weird setting for this character in general. Then again, he almost feels a bit like a Leatherface ripoff, but yeah. Anyway, with Strength, he is just terrifying. He is fast, he blocks his actual weak point with the chainsaw quite a bit. He also doesn't give much feedback, so sometimes you don't know if you're hitting him correctly. He also just completely smashes through walls at random points, and I know that sounds like really stupid, but it's quite terrifying because of how close quarters the whole fight is. And he is just so much pressure. It's just pressuring the player constantly, constant pressure, and just on top of you at all times, which makes this fight incredibly nerve-wracking, as you know that he is nearly, mere inches away from just cutting you down. Overall, I feel like strength is a very good place to start at, primarily because he is a boss that I don't have a lot of experience fighting. I've only fought him a couple of times because I haven't played House of the Dead 2 that much, but he's so memorable in the fact that he actually forces terror out of the player, and so I believe he should take the number 10 spot on my list. Bit of a weird choice, but I'm going to place what I think is one of the most frustrating boss fights in the whole series on this list. Say hello, ladies and gentlemen, to the Hanged Man. This boss is annoying for two simple reasons: speed and bats. Lots and lots of bats. These little fuckers are one of the most annoying boss attacks I've ever seen in an arcade shooter, and that's due to the balance of damaging the boss and also shooting these little flying fuckers and his army. These little hellspawns are just plentiful, and they do 1 damage per hit, and they don't linger on your screen, they just hit you outright. But besides that, I really like the boss, thanks to his design as well as his entrance. I love how he immediately makes himself apparent, like as a threat, by killing 2 scientists in front of you, and then having you stare up at him in the night sky, straight in the path of the moon. It's really stylistic. His style alone puts him on here, but his annoying fight is what puts him so low. He's also a lot like Chariot as he returns in Scarlet Dawn. Almost as annoying, but I still think his House of the Dead 1 counterpart is annoying thanks to the extra weapon types in Scarlet Dawn. But his fight is just really annoying, and I wish I could put him up higher, but just due to his annoying and hard to counter attack patterns, I just wish he'd be, a little less difficult. A cool fact is, he was one of the first bosses to have a second phase, as well as having more unique attacks than the base one, so I'll give him points for that. Overall, a main staple of the series, and one of the very happiest returns much later on. For this spot, we are going to take a trip to the newest release in the arcade series with the return of the Chariot. Chariot as a character was very weak and wasn't much, if anything, of a challenge in the original House of the Dead. It was just shoot armored zombie until it dies. No, they aren't called zombies in this game series, but for the sake of consistency, that's what I'm going to call them. But as Chariot was just armoured, that's all he was. There was nothing else to him. Granted, he lost the armour and took on a more interesting appearance once it was broken. But now instead, in Scarlet Dawn, he's pulled out all the roids and his armour shows. Like, you can't damage him until you break the armour, with no true weak point to harm him. Instead, you can only stun him by damaging the joints before he tries to harm you. It's like this until you get a hold of a rocket launcher and break his armour off his body, exposing the flesh underneath. This is when Chariot goes into almost like a rage state, as he turns into some kind of overdrive protocol where he begins to damage you and you also begin to damage him at the same time. Not enough to kill him though. He doesn't seem to actually die until his own axe falls upon him onto his neck. And when it does, it finally puts this main staple boss of the series to rest. Well then. This son of a bitch consumed so many damn of my pound coins back in the day that I had to put them on the list. Temperance is a dietitian's worst nightmare turned kaiju. I personally think this big boy could give Godzilla a run for his money. Anyway, why did I put Temperance on here? It's mainly because, unlike most House of the Dead bosses, Temperance is not damaged by your standards and attacks. Instead, they are simply stunned for a few seconds, giving you time to put some distance between you and Ronald McDonald's #1 customer over here. The only way to damage and ultimately kill the beast is to drop a clock on its head, and at the end of the day, Temperance is overall an interesting boss, with a stage practically dedicated to it. It also has such interesting attack methods such as, well, roly-polies, as well as being a persistent threat throughout the fight. Also, personally, I love the arena you fight in, as it's just the shattered remains of Italy that have been destroyed with the previous Curious incident. In the end, Temperance makes for a great and interesting fight. She just unfortunately ran out of time. Being the only one of 2 final bosses on this list, the World is one of the best designed rail shooter bosses I've ever fought in my rail arcade shooter career, mainly for how well his damage to stun balance is. This is because the only damage spot is on his chest and it is open at all time. This concept intrigues me, as it means that you almost, have to balance stunning him with dealing damage, so the fight becomes one of attrition and less of timing, as his attacks aren't that fast and are sometimes tricky, as the patterns become more and more technical in their approach throughout the fight, but still, none of the actual stun will actually damage him. It's primarily all the damage you put to the chest. He also is one of the only bosses in the House of the Dead games who has a second phase due to him forever evolving. But what limits him on the list compared to other bosses is he feels very bland, as when you fight him you're not running away or you're not advancing towards him, you're just walking around it as it begins to turn at you, which is actually kind of pathetic given it's meant to be a final boss. But it almost looks like he's stuck in the ground. But even with all of this, he's still an amazing final boss, and I'd say he's the second best in the entire series.
This was Goldman partying with.
Now this boss is a very strange one, and I feel like there should be more to him in his character, but Star, nonetheless, is a very interesting and brilliant boss with a lot of intrigue and questions revolving around him. This is all due to Star's numbering, as Star is said to be number 0001. This leads to me thinking that Star could be a replicate or an imitator of his predecessor, who we will look at much later on in the list. Star as a boss is very interesting. He has a very difficult attack pattern. Some of his attacks can feel like BS, but once you get, past those attacks and get to the later ones, he's not that difficult, but also he is, so it's a nice balance towards the end. As for Star's attacks, he starts off by sending projectiles towards you, and as he gradually becomes more damaged, he becomes more desperate and begins to barrel towards you sporadically. Another interesting aspect of Star, he's one of the only bosses in the series to show himself actually taking damage over time, as his cape breaks and his hood comes off and his skin begins to detach. It's very well designed. In the end, it is a great fight to test her accuracy and abilities, and takes the middle spot on my list. Back on the theme of bosses and duality, we come to what is House of the Dead 2's most famous boss. Introducing the greatest voice character in the series, to be honest, they didn't have much competition, Judgement. Judgement may not be one of the most unique House of the Dead bosses in terms of fighting style and pattern, but it makes up for it for intrigue and character. I mean, look at them! One of them is a mass metal of medieval armour, and the other's an imp with wings! Who's in charge? Do they share the same brain? How are they linked to each other? Why is the armor missing the head? Why doesn't the imp just sit behind the armor? All of these questions aside, as a boss, Judgement is a main staple of the series, and one I'm very happy to place this high on the list.
It's all happening again. Much worse this time.
It's coming!
Okay, I know how this looks, and many people in the House of the Dead series might be asking me why I've put him this high on the list, as he is not that popular with the fans. But Justice is a boss that just means so much to me. You see, in my hometown, the nearest seaside resort is Skegness. Not much of a resort, I know. But I used to always walk past the House of the Dead 4 machine, and, you know, they had it at the pier, and I used to look in horror and awe at the same time. It's the advertisement for the game played out. It's Curians talking to James and Kate, and then they're being attacked by Justice, and he's got this massive presence as he's huge. And when I saw it, my 9-year-old self freaked the fuck out. I mean, look at him! He is over 12 feet tall, has 4 goddamn arms, and can barely fit in the sewage system you fight him in. His methods of attack are only, sadly, come to 2. One of which is he grabs you and looks at you, which doesn't really do much, before biting, but, well, that's if you can't struggle out. And the other is a drop kick that instantly damages you. His patterns consist of him frantically moving his head left to right like a mad animal. Because he basically is one. Like, he's terrifying to me, and I love it. And then later on, he begins to block his face, as once he begins taking more damage, he begins to realise that he needs to protect himself. Fun fact, did you know that you can actually throw a grenade in his mouth during the first phase to completely destroy one stun state? I only learnt that in my most recent playthrough of the game, and that was literally a week ago. Overall, some people may not like him, but thanks to some childhood trauma as well as a great design and being basically House of the Dead 4's poster boy, and not forgetting to mention my reason for getting into the series in the first place, yes, Justice is the reason I love this series. Justice, you take the number 3 spot on my list, old friend. Now, with the series, each game tended to have one boss who you could class as that game's mascot. 4 was Justice, 2 was Judgement, and this big boy certainly is for the 3rd game in the series.
What? A security guard? You gotta be kidding!
Death as a boss is quite easy, and is the first boss you encounter in House of the Dead 3. He's also using the game's box art and is is on the official box art, so I'd say he's the game's poster boy without a doubt. That aside, I love Death in a very unconventional way. I think he is adorable. I used to find him intimidating, usually because of his sporadic movement and his aggressive nature of his face as you run away, damaging him, pushing him back as he pursues you. But as time's gone on, I find his persistence intriguing, almost like he has some kind of attachment to the player. And I love his design with the small little security guard uniform and his club of human skulls. Another point to Death is he is a reoccurring boss. Like, he starts off at the start and then literally has an entire stage dedicated to him, making him very cool. And as time goes on, he becomes more reckless and desperate, running through walls and slamming through doorways and banging his head off the ceiling. It's amazing how persistent this guy is, and that gives him more character. And in the end, as the fight continues and he finally gives in after taking so much punishment, overall, he was a great character of a boss, and more than deserving of the number 2 spot on this list. if you know the series at all, you understand that there was literally no other boss that could take the #1 spot on this list.
Welcome, my AMS friends.
Not you again.
I have been waiting for this moment for some time. Now you shall have a taste of the pain that I have endured.
Kate, you ready to do this?
I'm ready. I promised James that I wouldn't give up. That I'd keep fighting.
The Magician is Curion's original and greatest creation. A humanoid creature imbued with what is almost mystical power. As for his character, the Magician is a rogue creation of Curion that kills his master upon meeting him. He literally just outright kills Curion without hesitation in front of you. As for in combat, he is an absolute master of pure speed, as he literally moves faster than the camera can keep up with him. He is the only boss in the series capable of such a feat, and he has appeared on multiple occasions. First as a final boss, second as a penultimate, and finally as a secret boss at the end of House of the Dead 4 Special Edition. As for his lore, as I've talked about with Star, Magician's number is 000, making him the first in the line of all creations as to what Curion made, as well as, next to the Wheel of Fate, his most prized creation. All of these facts give Magician a character that can't be rivaled by any other boss in the series, as he appears to be the main villain almost, rivaling both Goldman and Curion in terms of threat and raw hatred towards G, and as well as the other AMS agents. A level of power that rivals his other final boss counterparts as well, with pure speed and power and almost undodgeable attacks, as well as just being one of the main antagonists. With all these aspects combined with his amazing fights as well as the boss theme, you know, I swear I have heard this boss theme somewhere, I just can't put my finger on it. I feel the Magician deserves to be named as much as he is Curion's greatest creation. I believe he is the greatest and the #1 boss in the House of the Dead series. Just want to take this quick opportunity to thank you all for watching today's video, guys. I've been working on this one for a while. The script is now currently at 2,600 words. I don't usually script my videos, but for stuff like top 10s, I like to put a lot of time and effort into it. So as for editing and script writing and voice recording, there's a lot more that goes into these, so usually I need to take more time to make them. And I apologise for the time it's taken, but I do appreciate your patience. If you're new to the channel, please click that subscribe button. I would love to see you all join the channel. Yes, I make Dead by Daylight content, but I also do stuff like top 10s, and I think these are going to become more regular as I get to uni and have my own space. It's going to be easier to record in my spare time. As well, if you're obviously already subscribed, don't forget to like the video so I can see if you guys all enjoy videos like these. And as always, this has been the Ginger Gamer. You know how it goes, guys. I'll see you in the next one.